Hello class, today we are going to start the last chapter of this civics book, chapter 9, Directive Principles of States Policy. In this chapter you will study about the directive principles of state policy, aims of the directive principles, implementation of the directive principles and the fundamental rights. The directive principles of state policy. The directive principles of the state policy are only suggestions to states to implement certain steps for the welfare of the people of state, making the relation between the state and the central governments close. These principles are not binding upon the states. States are free to implement these principles in their own ways. The ideas was taken from the Constitution of Ireland. The directive principles of state policy are instructions given by the Constitution to all the governments in the country. The governments at all levels are expected to frame their policies in accordance with these principles with an aim to establish a welfare state in India. The framers of the Indian Constitution felt that India had faced a lot of problems like poverty, illiteracy, unemployment, and inequality before independence and even just after independence. Therefore, they wanted to frame certain guidelines in order to help the future government, as these guidelines would help them to formulate policies to tackle problems that often arise in society. Often, as a result, the directive principles of state policy were added to the Constitution under the Article 36 to 51. The directive principles are also fundamental in the administration of the country. Our Constitution grants the state to apply these principles while making laws. These principles are applicable both to the central and state government and also to local self-government. Aims of the directive principles. The directive principles aim to establish economic, political, and social justice. They aim to provide equal opportunities to all in all walks of life. They try to raise the standard of living of the people. The directive principles are divided into various aspects: promoting economic justice, promoting Gandhian thoughts and socialist values. Some principles aimed at protection of environment, monuments, and natural heritage. Some principles uphold law, justice, and administration. Some directives advocate international peace and security. Promotion of economic justice. The economic principles are aimed at bringing economic and political welfare of the people. The government provided adequate means of livelihood to all, equal pay for equal work and humane condition of work and a decent standard of living. The directive principle also prevent excess wealth in the hands of a few people and are also against the exploitation of women and children. They also extend the participation of workers in the management of industries. Protection of natural heritage. Directive principles also create an awareness to protect the national heritage. They give guidelines to the government to protect environment and safeguard the forest and wildlife of the country. Protection of every monument of the country from disfiguring and destruction is also one of the main duties of the state. Promotion of Gandhian thoughts. The directive principles focus on the Gandhian thoughts. These thoughts are based on the socio-economic program launched by the Mahatma Gandhi during our freedom struggle. Some principles aim at promoting cottage industry in rural areas, establishing village panchayat as a unit of local self-government. This is the image of village panchayat. Providing free and compulsory education to all children up to the age of 14 years. Promoting and protecting the interest of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. This is the image of banning on intoxicating drugs, prohibiting intoxicating drugs and alcohol, modernizing agriculture sector, provision for law and justice. Certain principles relate to law, justice, and administration. These principles also provide uniform civil code for all citizens. They instruct the state to separate judiciary from the executive. Promotion of international peace and security. The directive principle include the promotion of international peace, security, and harmony. Settlements of international disputes through arbitration. Respect of international laws and treaties. Implementation of directive principles. Efforts are made to achieve the aim of the directive principles by both the central and the state governments. They have to make provisions to implement these directives. Free and Compulsory education to children up to the age of 14 years are being provided in all government and non-government organizations. Scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are given some quota in the government services and educational institutions. Untouchability is punishable by law. Zamindari system has been abolished and surplus land is redistributed among landless poor and economically weak people. Women are included as a members in the Panchayati Raj. They are given reservation of seats in parliamentary as well as state election. Free legal advice are given to the poor. The Minimum Wages Act was passed to bring just payment to workers for equal pay for equal work. This is the image of Manrega workers. The directive principles and fundamental rights. Our Indian Constitution provides both the directive principles and the fundamental rights for the holistic growth of an individual, which will lead to the establishment of a welfare state. There are some difference between directive principles and fundamental rights. Directive principles. First, they are guidelines for the government to frame policies for the welfare of the people. Fundamental rights. They are basic rights of individual. Second, they are not justifiable and cannot be challenged in courts. They are justifiable and are enforced. Citizens can go to the courts to secure them. Third, these are meant to protect and create certain privileges for the people. These are privileges enjoyed by the people. Fourth, they cover wider subjects like the international peace and security. The scope of these rights is limited for the citizens of India. Both the rights aim to protect the interest of the people. Since directive principles are non-justifiable, people virtually do not attach any importance to them. Directive principles are the basis of judging the government and its performance. If the government fails to work for the welfare of the people, then people may not re-elect the party to form the government. A government is also committed to establish a welfare state in order to bring social and economic justice. Directive principles are important in order to educate people of what a government can do and what can be expected of the government. They are the guidelines for the government. Do you know? Economic justice, to ensure that all citizens have adequate means of livelihood. Social justice, to promote the educational and economic interest of the weaker sections of the society. Summing up, the directive principles of state policy are instructions given by the Constitution to all the governments in the country. The directive principles aim to establish economic, political, and social justice. Efforts are made to achieve the aims of the directive principles by both central and state governments. Our Indian Constitution provides both the directive principles and the fundamental rights for the holistic growth of an individual, which will lead to the establishment of welfare state. Directive principles are important in order to educate people of what government can do and what can be expected of the government. They are the guidelines for the government. Thank you, students. Let's meet in the next class.